life, living and making a living can sometimes wear you out, grind you down, and dull your senses. So, for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that will give you a better chance of success and happiness, take this time out to sharpen your axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Vern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Vern, we've been speaking about the criteria of success for the last couple of weeks, and we were talking about being able to manage our time, and of course that was a faux pas, and it's more about being aware of time and different ways for engaging in purposeful behavior that could help us to be more productive. And I think we had a few more things to discuss along those lines.
We were really involved in recapturing our initiative. Now, the rest of the shows that we've done in the past and we'll do in the future are about primarily recapturing authority and esteem. See, most of the things that we don't accomplish in our lives, relationships not established or faltering, successes not achieved, is because of a lack of authority and esteem that's been put upon us by well-meaning and loving parents, siblings, peers, bosses, teachers, churches sometimes.
No, are you saying
so that's what all this is about, is getting it back.
Really? You know? If a relationship doesn't work, it's because of a lack of esteem?
Oh, more often
and
than
initiative?
Not. Sure.
Really?
There's the manipulations and the angling and the posturing that goes on oftentimes. Most of our fear is based on not feeling good about ourselves, not even knowing who we are sometimes. You know, and now you take that package and thrust it out into the world after it's been told not to talk to strangers and not to impose and, you know, not to beg for anything and don't tease, and all of a sudden you find that person in sales. Boy, it's overwhelming, overwhelming. And so the last few weeks we've been talking about sales because it's really the last frontier of the free enterprise system. And more people have to become open to the idea or the possibility of going into some kind of selling, whether it's some of the new networking or multi-level concepts that people are trying en masse, and most of them failing at it. They're not prepared. It's not an indictment against those programs. It's an indictment against our, against our lack of preparation, you know.
Yes.
And so everything we're talking about is to assist people in reperceiving themselves, recapturing some authority and esteem, renewing our initiative factors, most of which has been trained out of us in order to get us to accommodate and to do a good job. Our educational system, for example, and this is not, you know, again, an indictment, but our educational system obviously is preparing us to get a job, to go to work for somebody. That's why so many people get out, and if they can't find a job, they're in trouble.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are ending up in the free enterprise system. They're either in selling or multi-level or trying businesses for themselves, and vast majority are failing at it. And it's overwhelming, it's unnecessary. And so this show, as simplistic as it might seem sometimes, is all based on re-preparing, re-perceiving, making those transitions, developing some of those skills, being aware of what it's going to take sometimes to be truly free. See, this is not the land of the free and home of the brave. It's a land for the free and a land for the brave, and we've got to recapture that. Oftentimes our initiative is not tested in life, and so we have to do what we can to recapture it and to get in command of it. We were talking last week, for example, about an initiative journal where we actually begin to take credit for everything we do all day long. And as insignificant as a mark on a piece of paper seems to be, after a while it takes on a real value. And there is no question in my mind that if a person will become conscious of what they're doing, they will become conscientious about what they're doing.
And you mentioned also that the value of an initiative journal would be to help you to compile statistics as to which behaviors that you engaged in were more productive and which ones weren't, and also kind of the patterns that are
it takes
a
the
natural
emotional
part.
thing out of
Yes,
it.
yes.
Some years ago, I had a young salesman who was really quite good, and we had a program, a pattern of things that we were doing. And I was in the office one day, and it was during a period which I knew he would be home prospecting on the phone. And the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was Ben. And He said, I just need to talk. And I said, okay. He said, I don't understand what's going on. He said, I'm doing everything I've done. And I said, my attitude is okay. You know, he says, but it's not working. And I said, well, Ben, let me ask you this. How long has it been since you've gone back in your statistics, okay, and established your criteria? You know, what your percentages are. He said, well, it's been some time. And I said, well, why don't you hang up, go back 100 contacts. Go back 100 contacts, refigure your criteria, and call me back, and then we can talk about it. It took him probably 20, 25 minutes, and he called me back, and there was an entirely different attitude on the phone, a different demeanor, a different manner. And he said, I'm doing better than I normally do.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He said, what's that about? I said, I don't know. It's just an emotional thing that, you know, a fear begins to creep in. We begin to question ourselves. Maybe, for example, we've had an overabundance, if you would, of fruitless effort. You know, it seems to crop on us once in a while, and it can be overwhelming. And I said, but the reality of it is, when you know your statistics, that gives you stability and guarantees you security. We know this, that most salespeople at the end of the year are very surprised when they get their 1099. You know what I mean? They had no idea they made that much or thought they made a lot more. Most salespeople are not connected with what they really have been doing for the last hour, the last week, the last month, the last quarter, or the last year. Honestly,
and
they don't
so
know.
difficult to really be productive, and if you don't know that the behaviors you're engaging in are productive.
Yeah, because if you're not purposely productive, you're going to have a lot of non-productivity. There's no question. I'll tell you an interesting facet. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but it's worth a discussion. Experience tells me that you ask the person at the end of the year, typical salesperson, how'd you do this year? And they say, oh, great, fantastic. What's that called? Positive thinking. You're supposed to be positive.
Hot air.
Yeah, yeah. And they say, yeah, if it's any better, I'd have to worry, and you know, that kind of languaging.
Right.
You say, yeah, but how'd you do? Well, I made about 30, 35,000. Well, that's not true. You can't earn about 30 or 35,000. You know what I mean? You had to earn a specific amount, but they don't know. So that's a question mark. And I say, well, if you don't know that, how many sales did you make this past year? And that question mark, Gina, is bigger. You know, as you go back, they have less idea about how many actual sales they made. Say, well, if you don't know that, how many presentations did you put on? And that's a bigger question mark. They'd be further off the mark in their guesses, okay? All right, if you don't know how many presentations you put on, how many people did you contact? And they would have no idea at all. You know what I mean? That's not part of it. See, logic tells you that if I could say to someone, how'd you do this last year? And they say, well, let me look at my books here, you know? And they can kind of bring their books out like so many people I've worked with can do. And they say, okay, if you want to really know, this past year I initiated contact with 9,472 people. Now, the viewer might think, 9,472 people, you're not even supposed to talk to strangers. That's what a salesperson's job is.
Absolutely.
You know, to go out and encounter the world. Talk to lots of people every day. It's got to be lots of people. It's got to be every day. Now, those are initiatives. Doesn't mean you're going to catch somebody. There's knotted homes and preoccupations and what have you. But out of those people, I actually got to talk to 6,417. Okay? That'd be interesting to know, that I actually communicated with 6,417 people, and that about 712 of those people, which would probably be about right, were interested in what I was doing. I mean, they wanted to know more. They recognized a need, had a vacancy in their life, a vacuum that needed to be filled, and so they heard my story, and approximately 241 of those actually bought. You know what I mean? And my average sale was X number of dollars. My percentage of profit was X percent, and so last year I made $72,417. Oh, and if you really need to know, 87 cents. How many salespeople can do that? See, how many salespeople can actually give you those numbers? Too few. This is why in the more volatile sales environments that 90 to 95% of the results are coming out of 5 to 10% of the people. But the 10% of the people who are getting it, a lot of them are going to be able to tell you this.
They have the numbers to back up what they're doing.
They are in business. It's called accountability. And if you don't have that, you can be in more trouble than you can imagine.
Well, the sad thing is you hear all the time, oh, the bean counters. They don't know anything. They just crunch numbers.
Oh, well,
but there's certainly value in that.
They do know what they're doing. I remember some years ago, a friend of mine worked for Public Storage. It's a company out here that you've seen them, orange and yellow buildings, I think. And I was very impressed because I knew I could see what was going on, and I could see that every single evening, by 5 or 6 o'clock, they knew how many people had visited those lots internationally.
Really?
They knew how many people had walked onto those lots, how many people had looked at storage spaces, how many people had actually moved in, how many had moved out, how much money to the penny had been collected. They knew that every day. You know what I mean? And so when you know that, you can make adjustments. You can accelerate your advertising here. You can change personnel here, because you know when you have that criteria what's not working, and there's that stability. And that's where the security is, and that business is still growing. They're still doing a good job. It's kind of like some of the major department stores. People aren't conscious of this. Some of the major department stores in town have body counts. They know how many people walked into the stores, mm-hmm. and they are confident that most of them walked out. Okay, but they also know how many of them had bags in their hand from that store, mm-hmm. and it's about 30%. And others, the rest of it are shoppers, people moving through, spontaneously, impulsively buying, others buying on purpose. But see, this is our department store. See, we know how many people have flowed through, mm-hmm. we know exactly how many people we've done business with and what that meant. And the only way you can really do that is with what we were calling the initiative journal, where you actually take all the consequences of an effort, and as you walk away from each encounter, you actually keep a score as to what's going on, and then add those up after a while, and then check in on your emotional state. Are you sympathetic with what just happened, empathetic, or are you gratified? One interesting thing I've noticed over here, that people who've done this, first of all, after a while, you have accumulating numbers. You mm-hmm. You have your criteria for the week, for the month, for the quarter, for the year, and for the career. It takes a minimum amount of effort to do that. But down here, I wanted to stress something. Oftentimes, people starting out, they will have a criteria up here. Well, say, for example, you might have 3 sympathies in an hour, 4 empathies, and maybe 6 gratitudes.
Right.
As they continue in the process, they have 2 empathies on an average. They might drop to 2 sympathies, 2 empathies, and perhaps 8 gratitudes. Pretty soon this becomes 1 sympathy, 1 empathy, and 10 gratitudes.
Now, why
Pretty wild. It's this and this and this. And it's fascinating. I see this happening all the time. Now, do you think they're getting into better territory? I don't think so. They're becoming more relaxed, more proficient, more efficient, more acceptable, more adoptable, all the things that we're talking about.
They're increasing their odds.
Yeah, but if they don't have these records, this doesn't occur.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
if they don't have the
interesting.
records, this does not seem to occur. It stays in this volatile state because it's still emotional instead of intellectual. A major, major difference. Any person in selling, I would plead, beg, urge them to start in an initiative journal and just see what happens. Because if they continue it, I have never seen it not be effective. And we've talked about Paul Hardison. Remember Paul Hardison, the deaf mute? Young fellow that was number 7 out of 20,000 salespeople with an international company.
Yes.
Just overwhelming. I mean, how is that possible? He was stable. He did essentially the same things every day, knew what he was doing, knew where he needed assistance. Okay, and that's pretty powerful. We're going to talk about task mastering. I mean, the hour is rushing by, and I do want to cover this. We recommended Toastmasters to everybody. That's the club, very conservatively priced club that allows people to go and practice their speech making. And some years ago, I kind of did a twist on this and started a task mastering group. Task mastering. It's a rather unique thing. Every one of us have moments of guilt, things we knew we should do, had planned to do, didn't get done, and what have you, and we move on with our incompletes, and then sometimes wonder why we're not as successful as we might be. A task mastering group is there to support us without an agenda. See, if you are trying to be accountable and report to your spouse, that's demeaning. That's difficult because, well, first of all, they have a vested interest in your doing well.
Right.
If you do that with a sales manager or a boss, they have a vested interest in your doing well. If you try to do what I'm about to propose with a peer, now with someone in your same company or even in the same industry, they have a vested interest in you're not doing well. You know what I mean? That was, if they're competitively oriented. And so task mastering is facilitating, creating, if you would, facilitating, organizing a group of people anywhere from 3, possibly, but not more than 7.
So an unbiased, unemotionally involved group.
Yes. Now, these are people, for example, what you'd be, like, for example, what do you sell, Gina, typically? It's not a commercial, but just what exactly is the product?
Oh, I sell electronic components.
Okay, electronic components. Okay, we're going to call that EC. If you could combine with, for example, one of our staff members who is involved in enrolling people in seminars, those they're functioning as an agent. There's no conflict there.
Right.
I mean, if you could find someone that you cared about and wanted to do well, that wouldn't affect your income or your reputation in your business, nor would it affect his. So if we could add to that group, say, an insurance man, the same thing would be true. In other words, our success or failure wouldn't affect him, okay, nor ours his, okay. And then if we added to that group a real estate person, see, there's no conflict of interest there at all. Now we're up to 4. Then we can get someone who sells copy machines, someone who sold printing, okay. See what I'm saying? And let's see, pick one. Someone who sold
magazines.
Yeah, magazines. Sure. Okay. All right. Now these people come together once a week for their task mastering, and essentially the meeting would go this way. The first part of the meeting is report and celebration. Okay.
Now, does everyone give a report then?
Yeah, what you're reporting on is what you said you was going to do last week. You know, how many calls you were going to make, how many pages you were going to write, what letters you were going to originate. You know what I mean? In other words, something you really wanted to get done, you said to the group, this is what I'm going to do this week, and they all took notes of it. And then you come back next week and you make a report. You know, I wrote the pages, I made the calls, I did the thing, so everybody celebrates. However, if you didn't do it, you've got a whole bunch of people all over your case. In other words, they hold your feet to the fire. Why didn't you do it? What got in the way? Are you serious about doing it? Do you really intend to do it? Do you want to make a recommitment? What can we do to assist you in getting it done? I mean, really putting your feet to the fire. And that takes courage on their part to do that.
Yes.
And it takes courage to submit yourself to it. In other words, it takes courage to provide the fire and to submit to it, but I will tell you, if you get into a task mastering group and you get serious with it, now there's some turnover. You know, some people just can't stand the gaff. But I was in a task mastering group in Dallas, Texas some years ago, and I've been intending to start a new one because I got things done, Gina, that I have been procrastinating on for not only weeks, but months, even years.
It's amazing what peer pressure will do.
Oh, it's incredible.
That's the same reason that we go to a class to get in shape or go to the gym with a friend, because we know that they're going to be there every day. Whether we exercise or not doesn't affect them, but there's the little competition that goes along with it and the wanting to perform and look good.
Yeah, so the meeting would have report and celebration, or you're ostracized, okay? And some coaching and some support. The second part of the meeting is to make new commitments. In other words, to actually, you get through this process, and everybody goes around and recommits themselves as to what they're going to do next week, all right? And that gets challenged. See, in other words, the group has to say, are you serious about that? Do you really want us to hold you accountable for that?
Because
and
we
if
will.
you say yes, yeah, because we will. I remember, I hate to admit this, but there were times when I was in a rage in my last group. I mean, you get so frustrated, you know they're right, and yet you had all this rationale for not getting something done, and they had just burnt you for it. You know what I'm saying? And yet, boy, I'll tell you, I got stuff done. It was just wonderful.
You don't want to go through that the next week, so you find a way to make it happen.
Exactly. Now, the only time that it can break down, and this group has to see to it that it doesn't happen, is when you begin lightening up on yourself so you're not submitting to the process. I mean, there has to be an intention there of excellence, wanting to move forward, getting things done, and becoming really accountable. Because I'll tell you, it sure does make a difference. Because like I say, the subconscious mind is not very good at it, perfectly content. See, we have to constantly remind ourselves that there's a piece of our mind that's perfectly content eating out of a empty dumpster, okay, and sleeping in a concrete culvert, living in an open field. It's a survival mechanism, and it doesn't want you to go off doing crazy things about getting new cars and taking trips, and you know what I mean? It's okay just as it is. And so we have to really get conscious about this in our, what you say, criteria for success. I think that to get back to the original thing that we were talking about here, I had a number of things on the list: time consciousness, integrity, adaptability, the presentation that we make to the world verbally and physically, the behavioral management. In other words, actually managing our behavior and out of that developing a good attitude rather than depending upon it being the other way. And then, of course, accountability. There are 6 criteria here, Gina, criterion, that focus on a criteria for success, and it's absent the word results. Because I have nothing on here about results, because I truly believe with all my heart that if a person does these things, they will get more results, probably than they deserve. I mean, and I don't know, I'm being facetious. But,
we deserve it if we do the work, right?
Yeah, they'll go beyond their expectations typically. But this is kind of a conclusion of the series that we did on sales and closing sales and this type of thing in the criteria of success. And I think next week we're going to move on to some philosophical things. Actually, they're praxeological things. You remember almost a year ago, I identified the fact that I've been identified in the academic community as a praxeologist.
Yes.
And it's spelled P-R-A-X-I-O-L-O-G-I-S-T. And it comes from the Greek word praxis, which means from the street. Because I'm not an academic, but I've been out there on the front line, and my primary focus has been how in the world can we make it easier and better and more successful for people who want to be free, who want to take advantage of their life and the free enterprise system and to make a major contribution to our society. And that's what all these shows have been about. And I've had a great time in the series.
It has been wonderful.
I'm sure we're going to be branching off, maybe having some more guests and this type of thing.
And we've had so many wonderful phone calls from people who've enjoyed the show and letters, and we'll have to take some time and share some of those with our viewers.
You know what I wish? That so many of the people who skulk around me at the supermarket and in the post office would come up and say hi. We have a lot of people who
Yes.
they've seen you somewhere, but they can't quite match it. Some people call in and won't talk. They call on the show. By the way, our number is 1-800-661-3490. Once again, it's 1-800-661-3490. And if you call in, and by the way, I have a live performance coming up here in another week or so. And, I'm open to the first 6 people that call in. We'll go ahead and send them tickets.
Wonderful.
Free tickets.
Great idea.
And no obligation. Come and have a good time. Just watch. They're called verbal essays. And they're about praxeology. They don't challenge or refute any belief system. We have a good time with it. And we're about ready to get through the series and start embellishing, developing, examining, testing some of the things we've been talking about for the last year and some odd weeks.
And I think that it really is a good time to do that. I know so many people who watched the show have said, really, now I have some questions, and I think it would be wonderful if some of these people who have questions, who've been watching the show, and we had just briefly touched on the top of several subjects which I know people would like to explore in depth. And if they'd like to call in or write and send their questions, we'd be happy to address them on the show. If they have an issue they'd like to pick apart or discuss a little further, we certainly would love to.
I'd love to be challenged. I'd love to have someone who says, you're full of baloney. That's not that way. I just love that kind of confrontation. But frankly, we don't get too much of it because it's so mainstream. The other day I made an analogy of really what we're up to. We've been living and making a living and kind of striving and trying to get it together in a kind of a mainstream of information that runs through our lives. Aphorisms and, this kind of things. And some of us in our pursuit of excellence or peace of mind have kind of gone way over here with some areas. I mean, I don't mean to imply anything, but religion, for example, can take us way over or keep us fairly mainstream. In other words, we can get way over here where we're sitting on top of a mountain waiting for the world to end. You know what I'm saying? And then other people say, well, no, the answer hasn't been there for me. I'm going to go in this direction and go into a metaphysical state where crystals are all important. That their life is being directed by the emanations from a crystal. And I'm not refuting any of these. I'm just saying that's what we tend to do. What we're talking about is this. You know what I mean? Now, praxeology is subtle differences, obtuse postures and positions that seem to fill that gap, that makes this trip easier. And frankly, historically, has brought a lot of people back into this praxeological mainstream of information that seems to make a difference. And that's what these shows have been about. Now, the tendency is to, as you watch, to say, I know all that stuff. but I plead with people to listen for the subtle differences, because it's the little differences that make all the difference.
Absolutely.
You know,
and I think that we've mentioned that many, many times on this show, that it's the languaging, the way we use words, that makes the complete difference in how we view our lives.
Oh, by the way, if someone wants to write, we have a moment. I can give them an address. I believe they can see it on our pad. It's 1731 Howe Avenue. That's in Suite 321. And they can write to Sacramento, in this case, Sacramento, California, and it's 95825. And if they will write, we will send them a free prize and probably some tickets, and maybe give them a call, you know.
Great.
And have a great. Some of the people who've called in have just been wonderful, and we've gotten literally hundreds of phone calls, we can say now. Yeah, hundreds of phone calls on the show, and comes from some very interesting people. CEOs, sales managers, homemakers, students. It's been a delight.
Journalists.
Yeah,
it's
and
very
we encourage.
interesting.
A lot of people are startled to hear a live voice. They'll call and they're sure it's a voicemail, and oftentimes I'm right there. Someone called at 11:45 the other night.
Oh, really?
11:45, and I said, "Good evening, may I help you?" And there was this long silence. And I can't believe I got a live voice, you know. And we had a grand chat. So, please, if you're inclined, give us a buzz, and we'll chat. And we might be inviting people in to come into the studio too more these next few weeks, because we've had some great visits after the show.
It's always a pleasure when people come in.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this evening. We have some guests tonight. We're going to get together with a producer and see what we can do about expanding ourselves in this environment. And you're going places, kid.
We're all going places, Bern.
That's right. There's been a criteria of success, tacked on to persuasive finalizing, tacked on to the psychology of being. And next week we're going to go, I believe, back into the life formula. And I've got some new techniques and tactics to explain this icon, this verbal icon that's made so much difference in so many lives. And so we're going to have a good time. So once again, if you focused on us, what is it, how we surf to or purposely select this show, be with us next week a half hour earlier than this moment right now, and listen to Life Talk. And my name is Bern
Moses.
Moses. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.